Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you guys are doing great. And we are studying economics. This is lecture number 2. And today we are going to discuss two topics in this video. The one is 3 basic questions. And the second is what is the difference between positive economics and normative economics. Kokab Manzoor is here, teacher, trainer, and career counselor. You can see my WhatsApp number or other social media links. So you can contact me by using any of it. So you are ready. So in the last lecture, we discussed some basic concepts of economics, like what is scarcity, what are the resources, and what are the factor of production, and how can we utilize all these factor of production and the scarce resources in order to get maximum wants satisfied. So today we'll see that there are some basic or fundamental questions of economics that we need to address, or you can say all the economies have to address these questions. So what are these 3 questions? Number 1 is what to produce, the second is how to produce, and the third is for whom to produce. So these are called as fundamental economic questions or fundamental economic problems that all the societies have to address. So now first let's address these questions one by one. So first one is what to produce, right? Like we studied in the last lecture that we have a factor of production, and we can use these factor of production like scarce resources in order to get maximum production as so that we can satisfy more and more wants, right? So what to produce here means that what we should produce and what we should not produce, because we have a limited resources, we have scarce resources, so we cannot produce all the things that we want, right? So whether it's a poor economy or a rich economy or a developed economy, all the economies do have a certain amount of resources and they are scarce in nature mostly, right? So, and we, on the other hand, we have unlimited wants to satisfy. So what we do that we have to decide what product should we produce and in what quantities. Like for example, we may focus on food items or clothing items or vehicles, or you can say a defense system or any other, right? So to improve our standard of living. So we have to see that which one is a better one, or in other words, or we may produce some military goods or hardware, computers, or anything. So we have a range of needs or range of, you can say, commodity that we want to produce, but we first need to decide what is the priority for our economy. Like you see, if we take example of Pakistan, so we mostly grow agriculture products and you can say some leather goods and cottons and all these things. We want to produce computers and you can say high tech goods, but currently we may not be in a position to go for such goods in order to compete with the Western world or developed country, right? So the first question we have to address, what to produce and in what quantity, so that we may not have the excess production or we may not face any deficit in it, right? Next is how to produce. Now, once we decide that we are going to produce, for example, food item or agriculture products, or you can say surgical equipments or something like that. So the next is how much resources should we allocate for that kind of production, right? So this question arises since the resources are scarce in relation to the unlimited wants. So we need to consider how resources are to be used so that their best possible utilization becomes possible. So because we want to get maximum out of it, right? And this is what we called in economics the optimal utilization of the scarce resources. Optimal utilization means the best possible utilization. As I mentioned earlier, the resources are scarce, so we want to utilize them in best possible way so that we can get maximum wants satisfied. Otherwise, we may allocate more resources to one product and less resources to the another more important product. So in that way, our production procedures will not be the efficient one, right? So we may focus on the labor intensive, or we may focus on the capital intensive industries. We have to see that whether we should more utilize capital or we should go for labor. So there are certain industries where labor is more good for it, like for example handmade carpets and garments, and you can say embroidered cloths, etc., right? So here labors are more you can say suitable for it, while if we want to produce medicines and computer or high-tech goods, so capital might be the best option. The next is for whom to produce, right? So because we cannot satisfy all the wants of all the population, people living in a certain society, so we have to make a decision that how many of the each person's wants to be satisfied. So in emerging economies, there's a gap between rich and the poor is widening, so that there's a need for a deliberate attempt to create a more egalitarian society through policies that redistribute wealth and income. What does it mean? It means that, like you see, on one hand we have a rich class, an elite class, where they have, we can say, pets. For them we are importing the goods, right? On the other hand, we have poor people which may not who may not be having, you can say, may not be able to fulfill their basic needs, right? So we have to see that if we are producing food items, so this food item will, you can say, address whose need, right? So in that case we have to decide whatever we have decided to produce and whatever method we have decided to produce. So we need to know that whom we are going to address, right? Means we want to satisfy the needs of either rich class or the middle class or the poor class. So we want to decrease the gap between rich and the poor. So we'll try to address, if the country is facing that gap, so we if that economy may be addressing the needs of the poor more rather than the rich class, right? So these are the three questions that all the economies have to address. First one, what to produce, what type of products we should focus, what type of goods or services we should focus. The second, once we decide the product, then we have to see how to produce, right? How much resources are to be allocated. And the third one is then whom for whom to produce, means who are our priorities, right, in population, because in population we have millions of people, so we cannot satisfy the wants of all the people by producing all type of good in the right quantity. So we have to prioritize the needs, right? So these are the three questions. In fact, there are many other questions, but these are called the three basic fundamental questions that economics address, right? So the second topic that we want to cover in this video is the positive versus normative economics. That these are the two terms that mostly confuse the students. So we want to understand it in a very clear manner, that what is the difference between positive economics and normative economics. So positive economics simply means that portion of the economic judgments where we sorry, not the judgment, that portion of the economics where we just pass the statements or explain the empirical evidence, means the data that we have, we just explain it, right? Or we just describe it. So statements of what will happen based on empirical evidence are referred to as positive positive statements, or we can say that is the idea of the positive economics. In this we do not make any judgment. Like here you can see some example that will make the concept more clear. Like for example, a fall in the supply of petrol will lead to an increase in its price. It's a simple fact that we have collected the data, and based on that data, now we are telling or explaining or describing the things, that if the petrol price, if the supply of the petrol falls, so it may lead to increase in the price, right? Like you might have studied in earlier courses that when the price increases, demand decreases, right? So means, or in other words, when the supply decreases, that will create a shortage, and that shortage may lead to increase the prices. So an increase in increase in the tourist numbers in the Maldives will create more employment. This is another statement. We have seen, we have some data, and based on that data or empirical evidence, we are passing the statement that if more people comes to Maldives, so obviously it will create more employment, right? And similarly, increase in taxation on cars will result fewer cars being sold, means if the tax increases on taxation, increases on the cars, it will increase their price, and obviously when price increases, the demand will decrease, less people will buy. So you see, there is no judgment. We just telling the people, we just explaining the things, explaining some facts, or we are just explaining the phenomena of the economics based on certain empirical evidence. While on the other hand, when we talk about the normative economics, in this we are giving opinions or judgments, right? Like you see, when values or opinions come into the analysis, then this is the realm of normative economics. Here an opinion or the value judgment is being made. Like for example, you see, that should be done, and this should be beneficial for the environment, right? Like for example, you see, we in the last just literally we gave the example of Maldives, that if more people comes to Maldives, so employment will increase. So what we say then further, and therefore the government of the Republic of Maldives should do everything it can help to promote this industry. So positive statement says that when people will comes to Maldives, so it will increase employment. Okay, that's a fact, right? So now we are going to pass the judgment. We are going to give an opinion on it. Like, what if this happens? So it means that the Republic of Maldives should promote this industry so that more people should come, and our means that will increase the employment in it, right? Similarly, we are given the example that increase in taxation on cars will result in fewer cars being sold. So that was the statement. Now, what will be the normative economics in that case, or normative statement? So, and this should reduce the traffic congestion. If the taxation increases, what will happen? Less people will buy the car. Okay, that's fact. So now we are giving opinion. We say that if this happens, it will reduce the traffic congestion on roads, right? So see, whenever we are passing the judgments, that is the normative economics. And when we simply explain the facts or the figures or empirical data, so that basically called as positive economics. So hope you got the concept. Today we discussed two things. One is the fundamental of economics, fundamental questions of economics, and the second is the positive versus normative.